Last week, I basically gave what I called a postscript to Sato, letter from Sato.
Yeah.
And because I had basically extemporaneously created what I discussed, and there was much more that I was prepared to talk about than I had a chance to, you could see from the video, or if you watched last week, I was jumping around a lot. So I made a few mistakes that I want to correct now. Last week I referred to this as I can't even remember now. I meant to say the heart of the Lotus Sutra, and instead of I called it the strategy of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, I was referring to the heart of the Lotus Sutra. The other thing was that last week I mentioned several times as I was reading from the on establishing the correct teaching. I kept saying Seichoji, and I had conflated two dudes in my brain, and I need to correct that now. I thought I was talking about Tojo Kagenobu, and I was actually talking about, Hojo Tokiyori. And so the bottom line is that Tojo Kagenobu is the guy from Awa that was around Seichoji, that was trying to chase the Daishonin in the night that he first gave his speech after he came back to tell everybody about this Nam-myoho Renge-kyo teaching that he had come up with from all his studying at Nara and so forth. The Rishon Kokuran wasn't actually written until 7 years after that. Okay, so I got those two guys conflated because once their names are so close together. So I wanted to clarify that. If you wanted to know where that mistake was and clarifying it, it's on page 440 and 441 of the dictionary, talking about the life of Nichiren Daishonin. So that's done. Next, I wanted to go to the Lotus Sutra itself to reinforce what I did say last week without having read this for that purpose. But it will be very supplemental to what I had said about, you don't even want to try. Last week, the whole idea was to talk about slanderers. I call them ikchantikas, people that try to separate you from the correct teaching. They're basically a manifestation of fundamental darkness, ultimately, is the way you perceive and understand them, because that's the truth. That's the evil in their life that's turning the Buddha nature and creating the delusion, okay? But then becomes manifest in their actions as people. And that's what this whole Gosho is going to be about, it just so turns out. All right? So going from the Simile and Parable chapter on page 109. And that's why I said don't go trying to convert ikchantikas. It's just not, I said it's not worth your time because they're not going to listen to you. They don't have the capacity to understand. It actually says in the Lotus Sutra, just don't even tell them. And I'm going to read that to you right now from page 109 from Simile and Parable from the Threefold Lotus Sutra here. He says, you must not recklessly transmit it wherever you happen to wander. Okay? Going further down, if there is someone who believes and accepts the law of this sutra, that person has already seen the Buddhas of the past, has respectfully offered alms to them, and listened to this law. If there is someone who can believe what you preach, then that person has seen me. So basically, those people that understand right away, that's not because of anything other than their own actions, their own karma that's been created from their past devotion. All right? Now, he goes on to say, though, at the bottom of page 109, this is a very famous quote. The Lotus Sutra is preached for those with profound wisdom. So anybody that's a new member, this isn't the place to start. Okay? It's even in the Lotus Sutra. This is not the place to start. He talks in the previous page, on page 108, about all the different expedient means he uses to get people to the point where they're ready for this. Okay? He says, this Lotus Sutra is preached for those with profound wisdom. If persons of shallow understanding hear it, they will be perplexed and fail to comprehend. For all the voice hearers and Prakyeka Buddhas, which is what? People of learning and realization. In this sutra, there are things that are beyond their powers. They can't understand them. Okay? They have not created the relationship to be able to understand them. He says, even you, Shariputra, and we know Shariputra was a badass, right? Okay. He says, even you, Shariputra, he's the head, he's the top of the voice hearers, right? So he knows a lot of stuff that he's understood. Okay. He says, even in the case of this sutra, you were only able to gain entrance through faith alone. It wasn't anything that you knew from being a voice hearer and listening to other things. This is the first time this teaching has ever been expressed to you. He says, how much more so then, if I can say that to you, how much more so than the other voice hearers? Those voice hearers, it is because they have faith in the Buddha's words, faith in the Buddha's words, that they can comply with the sutra, not because of any wisdom of their own. So this isn't about the fact that you're a rocket scientist. This is about the faith that you have in the mentor. Okay? Understand that. He says, and then he says, also, Shariputra, to persons who are arrogant or lazy or taken up with views of the self, like you, Robert, do not preach this sutra. Those with shallow understanding of ordinary persons who are deeply attached to the five desires cannot comprehend it when they hear it. Do not preach it to them. If a person fails to have faith but instead slanders this sutra, immediately he will destroy all seeds for becoming a Buddha in any world. That's why you're not to expose them to that danger. You don't even pass it in front of them. You're supposed to have the compassion to know, no, I'm not going to even take you there. You're not about trying to win a battle. This isn't about convincing somebody. This is about actually their fortune to have it manifest based on who they are at the time they meet it. He says, do not preach it to them. If a person fails to have faith but instead slanders this sutra, they will immediately destroy all seeds for becoming a Buddha in any world. Or perhaps he will scowl with knitted brows and harbor a doubt or perplexity. Listen, and I will tell you the penalty this person will pay, whether the Buddha is in the world or already entered extinction. If this person should slander a sutra such as this, or on seeing those who read, recite, copy, and uphold this sutra, should despise, hate, envy, or bear grudges against them, the penalty this person must pay, listen, I will tell you now, when his life comes to an end, he will enter the Avicii hell and be confined there for a whole kalpa. That's why the Daishonin is able to say very expressly about the people that are persecuting him, what kind of karma they've created in doing so. And when the kalpa ends, he will be born there again. He will keep repeating this cycle for countless numbers of kalpas. This is not a small thing. Shakyamuni is saying this, not me. Though he may emerge from hell, he will fall into the realm of beasts. So he's not going to make it back up to something like learning or realization again. He's going to be born in the world of animals, becoming a dog or a jackal. His form lean and scruffy, dark-colored with scabs and sores, sometimes for men to make sport of. Okay? Because he cuts off the seed of Buddhahood, he will suffer this penalty. And then I'm going to jump over here because the Daishonin is going to actually refer to this right at the very beginning of the Gosho, where he says, with faculties impaired, they will constantly dwell in hell, strolling in it as though it were a garden. And the other evil paths of existence he will come to look upon as his own home. That's how used to being in hell they will be. All right? So understand, there's a downside for people that slander. And that's what I was talking about. And that's what I was saying, be careful of. Ikchantikas, don't blow them off. Refute them every time, though, because you're obligated to do that. Okay? Now, here's the lecture, but we're not going to probably get into the lecture tonight because I've got so much to read. We'll be starting that next week. Okay, this is Letter to the Brothers. And I was going to give you a quick redefinition of the word faith, but I'll just save that for maybe the end if I have time. Let's get right into the Gosho itself tonight on page 493 of Volume 1. Okay, Letter to the Brothers. And do you guys have any idea who the brothers are?
Yes.
Muanaka and Muanaga. Okay, the Ka, Muanaka is the older one, and Muanaga, the Ga, is the younger one. All right, that's the way I try to remember them. Okay, starting out. Woo! Okay, here we go. This is good stuff, man. This is a major ass Gosho, by the way, just so you know. All right.
Background,
Okay, page 493. What?
Background, no? Background.
Oh, yeah, thank you, dear. Good point. Let's start on the background first. All right. Background on page 502. Thank you. The two brothers to whom this letter is addressed were the sons of Ikegami, Seimun, no Taiyu, Yasumitsu, who held an important post in the Kamakura in the government's Office of Construction and Repairs. The older brother, Muenaka, was probably converted to Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism in 1256, and the younger brother, Muenaga, shortly thereafter. The father, Yasumitsu, was a loyal follower of Ryokan, and everybody knows who Ryokan is. He's bad news. Chief priest of Gorakuji Temple of the True Word Precept School, and vehemently opposed the beliefs of his two sons for over 20 years. In fact, he went so far as to disown his elder son on two occasions in 1275 and 1277. Primogeniture, the right of the that's what that is. Okay, the right of the eldest son to succeed to the wealth and social prestige of the family, was a vitally important aspect of Japanese society. The individual scarcely existed outside of a family context, and centuries of intra-family rivalry, feuding, and even murder attested to the importance of being first in line for inheritance. Virtually insurmountable social and economic sanctions existed against disowned persons. By disowning Muenaka, their father in effect was provoking rivalry between the two to trade his beliefs for the right of his father's estate. The Daishonin sent letters of encouragement to the two brothers and their wives, urging them all to unite and maintain their faith. In 1278, the brothers finally succeeded in converting their father to the Daishonin's teachings, and there's a bunch of goshos written to these guys about this whole trail of events, just like with Shijo Kingo and others. When the Daishonin's health began to fail in 1282, at the urging of his disciples, he set out for the hot springs of Hitachi. Sensing that death was imminent, however, he shunned the hot springs in favor of a trip to Muenaka's residence in Ikegami in what is present-day Tokyo. After having taken measures to ensure the perpetuity of his teaching, he passed away on the 13th day of the 10th month, 1282. Letter to the Brothers mentions three ways in which obstacles should be viewed in light of Buddhism. As an opportunity to use strong faith to purge oneself of bad karma from the past. 2, as an instance of evil friends attempting to obstruct one's practice. And 3, as an example of the negative function of the devil king of the sixth heaven possessing one's parents or others in order to destroy one's faith. Okay, so starting on the Gosho on 493. Okay. The Lotus Sutra is the heart of the 80,000 teachings and the core of the 12 divisions of the scriptures. The Buddhists throughout the three existences attain enlightenment because they take this sutra as their teacher. All right, so all Buddhas attain Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra. Okay, but the original state, the Buddha of Kuan, is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, all Buddhas actually attain Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The Buddhas of the 10 directions guide living beings, and I need to qualify that again. Do you understand when he talks about this sutra? What is he talking about? Is he talking about the text that I have contained within my hands? No, because if you read the Lotus Sutra, you find him referring to a lot of older Buddhas preaching the Lotus Sutra, which how could it be exactly the same teaching? Okay, so it's actually to be considered the life of the original teacher. That's the correct understanding, because that way it's always consistently the same. It's the simultaneity of cause and effect. That's exactly what it is. It's the original state. It's the living original state of everything. The Buddhists throughout the three existences attain enlightenment because they take this sutra as their teacher. The Buddhas of the 10 directions guide living beings with the teachings of the one vehicle as their eyes, the one vehicle of the Lotus Sutra, the one vehicle of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Entering the sutra repository, that Daishonin is qualifying now what he's gone through to understand all this stuff. Entering the sutra repository and examining the complete collection contained therein, I find that two versions exist of the sutras and treatises brought to China between Yongping era of the later Han and the end of the Tang Dynasty. There are 5,048 volumes of the older translations and 7,399 of the newer ones. Each claims by virtue of its contents to be the highest teaching of all. Comparison reveals, however, that the Lotus Sutra is as superior to all the other sutras as heaven is to earth. Now there's an asterisk there, or a 1, and I need to qualify that to you, because this is older translations. Understand, this is where a lot of the mistakes occur. All right, what's the translation of the Lotus Sutra that I'm actually reading from? Who's the Kumarajiva? Exactly. Okay, that's the older translation. So, good job, bro. The older translations refers to sutras translated into Chinese primarily by Kumarajiva and Paramantha, okay, who emphasized conveying the true meaning. Okay, so there were people that did the true meaning, used a Buddhahood, a Buddha nature to perceive what was really being conveyed, and did the translations based on that. That's pretty much what we're doing now with the Buddhism of the Sun, okay? And then the newer translations refers to those made by Xuanzang and the later translators who placed greater stress on literal translation. And literal translation can get you in a lot of trouble, okay? Right? People can be trying to say things that are very difficult to convey, and they use manners of conveyance that have a lot of latitude, all right? So, again, going on. Here he says, comparison reveals, however, that the Lotus Sutra is superior to all other sutras as heaven is to earth. It rises above them, still on page, yeah, right? It rises above them like a cloud above the mud on the ground. If other sutras are compared to stars, the Lotus Sutra is like the moon. If they are as bright as torches, bonfires, stars, or the moon, the Lotus Sutra is then as bright as the sun. This is a general comparison. More specifically, the Lotus Sutra contains 20 outstanding principles. The two most important are the teachings of major world system dust particle kalpas and numberless major world system dust particles kalpas ago. Sanzen Jin Tinko and Goyaku Jin Tinko, right? But Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is based on Kuan Ganjo, all right? Beginningless time. The former is explained in the Parable of the Phantom City chapter in the 3rd volume of the Lotus Sutra. Suppose someone, and y'all know about what major world system dust particle kalpas is. Okay, he's going to explain it. Suppose someone grinds a major world system into dust. He then takes this dust with him and goes 1,000 major world systems toward the east, where he drops one particle. He proceeds another 1,000 major world systems eastward and drops the second particle. He continues on in this manner, dropping another particle and then another until he has exhausted all the dust particles of the entire major world system. Then he gathers up all the major world systems along the route he has taken, whether they have received a particle or not, and reduces them all to dust. He places these dust particles in a row, allowing one entire kalpa to pass for the placement of each. When the first kalpa has passed, he places the second particle, and then the third, until as many kalpas have passed as there are particles of dust. The total length of time represented by the passage of these kalpas is referred to as a period of major world system dust particle kalpas. Now, the beautiful thing about this for me was, all the other major religions talk about a creation.
Creation.
This is creation as in the universe and in real science. Okay, this is talking about an infinity rather than a rib from somebody that was formed by a god. Okay, so the first time I read about and heard about this, I said, okay, this is the real deal. This makes sense. Okay, this is right in keeping with what we know in modern day. Okay, so that's a major world system dust particle kalpas. Now, do you know what numberless is? You take each one of those particles of dust, you turn it into a world. Each one of those particles of dust, you turn it into a world. You grind that up, and you do the same thing again with all those dust particles. And then, if you can comprehend how many kalpas that is beyond that.
Yes.
Okay. So the total length of time represented by the passage of all these kalpas is referred to as a period of major world system dust particle kalpas. It was this long ago, in the remote past, indicated by a span of major world system dust particle kalpas, that the three groups, so this is when the first time that Shariputra and those guys that were at the assembly had heard, okay? The three groups of voice hearers, including Shariputra, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, going on to page 494, first column, and Rahula, learned the Lotus Sutra from a bodhisattva who was the 16th son of the Buddha, great universal wisdom excellence. Who was that? Shakyamuni in a previous lifetime. Deluded by evil influences, though, check this out. So why are they now hearing the Lotus Sutra for what they think is the first time? Right? He's preaching the Lotus Sutra to them. Do you understand what he just said? He's saying this to the people. Okay, so deluded by evil influences, however, they eventually abandoned the Lotus Sutra. Deluded by evil influences. Those are the Ikchantikas, right? Yes. They fell because of those influences, those people that were able to influence them, those entities that were able to influence them, they fell back into the flower garland, wisdom, great collection, or Nirvana Sutra, or further down to those are all high-end Mahayana, or further down to the Mahavrachana, true word, right? Profound secrets or meditation as Amrita Sutras, or even backslid to the Hinayana teachings of the Agamas. Do you understand? Continuing this descent, they fell back through the practice of goodness in the human and heavenly worlds, and finally into the paths of evil. During this period of major world system dust particle kalpas, they were most often born in the hell of incessant suffering. I just read to you from the Lotus Sutra what will happen. Do you understand, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes they were born in the seven great hells, or less frequently in the more than 100 hells. On very rare occasions, they were born into the world of hungry spirits, animals, or asuras, to make it even into the 10 worlds, right? And only after one kalpa, as many as dust particles were, only after kalpas as many as dust particles were they able to be born again in the human or heavenly world. The second volume of the Lotus Sutra states, he will constantly dwell in hell, which is why I went and looked in the Lotus Sutra to find that. Okay, he will constantly dwell in hell, strolling in it as though it were a garden. And the other evil paths of existence he will look on as his own home. Okay, I already read that to you from the Simile and Parable chapter. Those who commit the 10 evil acts fall into the hell of repeated rebirth for torture, or the hell of black cords, where they must spend 500 lifetimes or 1,000 hell years. Those who commit the 5 cardinal sins fall into the hell of incessant suffering and are born again in this world after remaining there for 1 medium kalpa. Now this is again the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. This isn't necessarily the teaching of Buddhism of sowing. All right? He says, then why is it then that those who abandon the Lotus Sutra fall into the hell of incessant suffering and have to stay there for such an unimaginably great number of kalpas? The offense of discarding one's faith in the sutra must at times seem nowhere near as terrible as killing one's parents. Like, you got shakabuku, you go Titan, no one would think that's a big deal. What he's trying to explain to here is that this is a very big deal, because the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law is the teaching of Buddhism of sowing. Right? Nevertheless, even if one killed one's parents in 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000, or even 100 million lifetimes. And remember, we talked about the three levels of killing, right? Yeah. Killing your parents or an arhat was specifically a super bad thing, right? 1,000,000 or even 100 million lifetimes, one would not have to remain in hell for a period of major world system dust particle kalpas. Wow.
This crime
is really bad. Okay? Even if one were to kill 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or as many as 100 million Buddhas, and it's not Nichiren making this up. This is from the Lotus Sutra. Okay? Even if one were to kill 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or as many as 100 million Buddhas, one would have to dwell in hell for a span of numberless major world system dust particle kalpas. Pardon me, that's a question. Even if one were to kill 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or as many as 100 million Buddhas, not your parents, would one have to dwell in hell for a span of numberless major world system dust particle kalpas? The three groups of voice hearers, however, had to suffer through a period of major world system dust particle kalpas, and the great bodhisattvas, because their sin would be even greater because they had a greater level of advance before they started the decline by listening to Ikchantikas, okay, they had to go through a period of numberless major world system dust particle kalpas because of the offense they committed by discarding the Lotus Sutra. This is what an unimaginably terrible offense it is. Okay? So we've qualified. You definitely don't want to give up your faith. And you don't want to be affected by others that try to impact it. To put this simply, when one strikes at air, one's fist will not hurt. But when one hits a rock, one feels pain. The offense of killing an evil person is minor compared with the offense of killing a good person, which is grave. If one kills someone who is not one's kin, it is like striking mud with one's fist. But if one kills one's own parents, it is like hitting a rock. A dog may bark at a deer without having its skull broken, but if he barks at a lion, its bowels will rot. An asura who tried to swallow the sun and the moon had his head shattered into 7 pieces. Because Devadatta harmed the Buddha, the earth split open and swallowed him alive. That's all in the Lotus Sutra. The seriousness of an offense depends on the person one harms. The seriousness of an offense depends on the person one harms. So if you try to harm somebody who has devoted themselves to the propagation of the law, not just Nichiren, but any of us, that's a major offense. You're no different. Do you understand? Okay. The Lotus Sutra is the eye of all the Buddhas. It is the original teacher of Shakyamuni Buddha himself, the Lord of Teachings. If one discards one word or even one brushstroke of this sutra, the offense is graver than that of one who kills one's parents 10 million times over, or even one who sheds the blood of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Now, would you logically assume that? No. That's why a mentor has to qualify and clarify it to you so that you know the truth, so you don't minimize the reality of what's involved when you're approached or tempted or affected by those kinds of things. This is why those who forsook the Lotus Sutra, top of page 495, had to suffer for a period of major world system dust particle kalpas or numberless major world system dust particle kalpas. Moreover, it is extremely difficult to meet a person who expounds this sutra exactly as the sutra directs. Now he's referring to himself there. But it's also to us if we're of the same mind as Nichiren. Do you understand? All right. It is even more difficult than for a one-eyed turtle to find a piece of floating sandalwood, or for someone to hang Mount Sumeru from the sky with a fiber from a lotus stem. And I'm really referring to not just us, but President Ikeda specifically. That's why I say you can't be complicit in that kind of slander. You don't want to set yourself up for those kinds of obstacles to appear in your path. You can immediately dissipate them by understanding the teaching and always protecting, always being, who you're supposed to be as a bodhisattva of the earth. The great teacher Tsu-in was the disciple of the Tripitaka master Xuanzang. We also saw those are the people from the latter, right? When we talked about the 2 types of translations. And the teacher of Emperor Taizun. He was a sage who not only was well versed in the Sanskrit and Chinese scriptures, but also had memorized all of the Buddhist sutras. The Buddha's ashes fell from the tip of his writing brush, and light shone forth from his teeth. His contemporaries respected him as though he were the sun and the moon, and people in latter ages earnestly sought out his teachings as guides for living. Even so, the great teacher Dinyo denounced him, stating that though he praises the Lotus Sutra, he destroys its heart. He's the founder of the consciousness only or something, the Dharma characteristics school. Okay, so even so he said great things about the Lotus Sutra, he abandoned it. He created a school that went in a whole different direction and discouraged people from taking up the Lotus. This statement means that though he intended to praise the Lotus Sutra, in the end he destroyed it. That's like somebody saying, Lotus Sutra is really great, but I do Nimbutsu. Can't do that. Can't do that. That's a great slander. The Tripitaka master Shan Wei was once the king of Udayana in India. He abdicated the throne. This is first column, page 495. He abdicated the throne, becoming a monk. And in the course of his Buddhist practice, journeyed through more than 50 countries in India, finally mastering all the esoteric and exoteric teachings of Buddhism. He's a true word guy. Later he went to China and became the teacher of Emperor Xuanzun. Every true word priest in both China and Japan has since become his follower. In spite of having been such a noble person, he had been a king. He died suddenly, tormented by Yama, the Lord of Hell, though no one knows why. And that's one of the reasons why the Daishonin qualified. That's obviously BS, because that wouldn't have happened to somebody that was correct. All right? I, Nichiren, believe that this happened because though Shan Wei was first a votary of the Lotus Sutra, when he read the Mahavajrana Sutra, he declared it superior to the Lotus Sutra. And don't forget the people on Mount Hei who had followed Dengyo by the third time, Jikaku, I think, and Chisho, one of those, the third or fourth one, they had already started to go to true word because it was heavy duty, because it had all this secret shit. All right? Rather than sustaining and maintaining the Lotus as Dengyo had instructed. Do you understand? That's what turned that temple and the ordination platform into. Okay. He declared it. Pardon me. But when he first read he was first a votary of the Lotus Sutra. When he read the Mahavajrana Sutra, he declared it superior to the Lotus Sutra. And the Mahavajrana Sutra is what true word's based on, right? Top of page 495. Similarly, it was not because they had committed the 10 evil acts or 5 cardinal sins, the Shariputra, Magdayana, and the like were doomed to wander through the evil paths of existence for a period of major world system dust particle culpus or numberless major world system dust particle culpus. Nor was it because they had perpetrated rebellion or any other of the 8 offenses. It was because they had met someone who was an evil influence in Ikchantika and discarded the Lotus Sutra to take faith in the provisional sutras. All right? The great teacher Tentai commented, if they encounter an evil friend, they will lose their true mind. True mind means the mind that believes in the Lotus Sutra, while lose means to betray one's faith in the Lotus Sutra and transfer one's allegiance to the other sutras. This is why I go so crazy on those guys like Robert and Mark and everybody else. Okay? I will not be complicit in their slander by keeping my mouth shut. All right? The sutra reads, but when they are given the medicine, they refuse to take it because they think they know what they don't know. Tentai stated, those who have lost their minds refuse to take the good medicine, even though it is given to them. Lost in the sufferings of birth and death, they run away to another land. Since this is so, the Daishonin continues, believers, and look at all the stars here. Here, this is an important paragraph. Since this is so, believers in the Lotus Sutra should fear those who attempt to obstruct their practice, which is the people saying, don't listen to Daisaku Ikeda. Start over. Since this is so, because if they say that, they're also saying, don't listen to Toda, don't listen to Makaguchi as well. All right? Since this is so, believers in the Lotus Sutra should fear those who attempt to obstruct their practice more than they fear bandits, burglars, night raiders, tigers, wolves, or lions, even more than the invasion now by the Mongols. This world is the domain of the devil king of the 6th heaven. All of its people have been under the rule of this devil king since time without beginning. Not only has he built the prison of the 25 realms of existence within the 6 paths and confined all humankind within it, but also he has made wives and children into shackles, and parents and sovereigns into nets that block off the skies. To deceive the true mind of the Buddha nature, he causes the people to drink the wine of greed, anger, and foolishness, and feeds them nothing but dishes of evil that leave them prostrate on the ground of the three evil paths. When he happens on persons who have turned their hearts to goodness, he acts to obstruct them. He is determined to make believers in the Lotus Sutra fall into evil. But if he is unsuccessful, he tries to deceive them gradually by luring them toward the Flower Garland Sutra, which resembles the Lotus Sutra. This was done by Tu Shun, Qi Yin, Fa Zhang, and Qin Quan. Then Qia Xing and Shen Chuan were the evil companions who craftily deceived believers of the Lotus Sutra into falling back into the Wisdom Sutras. Similarly, Xuan Sang and Tzu In led them toward the Profound Secret Sutra, while Shanhua Wei, Qing Chi, Pukun, Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho deceived them into following the Mahavrochana Sutra. Some of those were Dingyo's descendant disciples, right? Bodhidharma and Huiko caused them to stray into the Zen school, while Shan Tao and Honen tricked them into believing the Meditation Sutra, Amida. In each case, the devil king of the sixth heaven possessed these men of wisdom in order to deceive good people. Because the lotus was left to specifically say, this is my highest teaching. So in professing any of these other teachings, they convinced them to abandon and ignore the teaching of Shakyamuni. This is what the Lotus Sutra means when it says in its 5th volume, evil persons will take possession of others. The great demon of fundamental darkness can even enter the bodies of bodhisattvas who have reached near perfect enlightenment and prevent them from attaining the Lotus Sutra's blessings of perfect enlightenment. Because near perfect enlightenment, you're not quite there. That's stage 51, right? Right? How easily can he then obstruct those in any of the lower stages of practice? The devil king of the sixth heaven takes possession of the bodies of wives and children and causes them to lead their husbands or parents astray. It's when your family opposes you or the pressures of being a parent creates an obstacle to your faith. He also possesses the sovereign in order to threaten the votary of the Lotus Sutra, or possesses fathers and mothers and makes them reproach their filially devoted children. That would be like China taking over and saying you can't have religion. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I was thinking that when I...
Yeah, I know. Well, this is the answer to that question. You
Flip
them off and you keep going.
You cannot speak about this thing again.
Okay, this is the...
Or you are a terrorist.
Yeah, you don't want to go there, though. I don't want to do numberless major world system dust particle kalpas after the original teachers already told me what's going on. Mm-hmm. There should be no reason I would ever abandon this perspective or ever have it affect me, as long as I'm constantly trying to be of the same mind. And I'm doing all the things.
Not in your lifetime. It will not happen in your lifetime.
It won't, and if it doesn't happen in this lifetime, then I attain a Buddhahood that keeps it from ever happening again. To understand, all of those guys you just mentioned had never attained the 10th world, because they couldn't. And they all got prophecies of enlightenment in the Lotus Sutra. Prince Siddhartha sought to renounce his title, but his son Rahula had already been conceived. His father, King Suddhodana, therefore admonished him to put off leaving to become a monk until the child was born. The devil took advantage of the situation and delayed the childbirth for 6 years. Shariputra began his bodhisattva practice in the distant past, in the latter age after the passing of Zentara Buddha. He had already practiced for 60 kalpas when the devil king of the sixth heaven became worried that in another 40 kalpas, Shariputra would complete his practice. The devil disguised himself as a Brahmin and begged Shariputra for his eye. Everybody knows that parable, right? He begged him for his eyes. Shariputra, gouges it out, gives it to him, and the guy goes, yuck, and smashes it. Shariputra was so pissed off he fell into hell. In response, Shariputra gave him one of his eyes, but from that moment he lost his will to practice and then gave up, thereby falling into the hell of incessant suffering for countless kalpas. 680 million lay believers in the age after the passing of Great Adornment Buddha were deceived by the monk's shore of suffering, and 3 other monks so that they denounced the monk universal practice, and as a result fell into the same hell for as many kalpas as there are dust particle kalpas of the land. The men and women in the latter age, after the passing of Lion Sound King Buddha, followed the monk's superior intent to observe the precepts, but mocked the monk root of joy, and so fell into hell, where they remained for countless kalpas. It is the same with Nichiren's disciples and lay supporters. The Lotus Sutra reads, since hatred and jealousy toward the Sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? It also reads, it will face much hostility in the world and be difficult to believe. The Nirvana Sutra states, by suffering an untimely death, rebuke, curses or humiliation, beatings with a whip or rod, imprisonment, starvation, adversity, or other minor hardships in this lifetime, one can avoid falling into hell. The Parinirvana Sutra says, they may be poorly clad and poorly fed, seek wealth in vain, be born to an impoverished and lowly family, or one with erroneous views, or be persecuted by their sovereign. They may be subjected to various other sufferings and retributions. It is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law that they can diminish in this lifetime their suffering and retribution by protecting the law. Okay, and I've clearly discussed what that encompasses, right? These passages mean that we, who now believe in the correct teaching, in the past once committed the offense of persecuting its practitioners, and therefore are destined to fall into a terrible hell in the future. The blessings gained by practicing the correct teaching, however, are so great that by meeting minor sufferings in this life, we can change the karma that destines us to suffer terribly in the future. As the sutra says, one's past slanders may cause one to suffer various retributions, such as being born into a poor family or a family with erroneous views, or being persecuted by one's sovereign. A family with erroneous views means one that slanders the correct teaching. So, are all of you fortune babies?
No.
No.
Are any of you fortune babies? Okay, then all of us have that same karma, right? None of us were born into families that were already chanting the Daimoku in the latter day, right? Okay? A family with erroneous views means one that slanders the correct teaching, and persecutions by one's sovereign means to live under the reign of an evil ruler. These are the 2 sufferings confronting you now. In order to expiate the sin of your past slanders, because when the Daishonin is saying this to the brothers, there's nobody that hasn't been born into that kind of a family also, all right? Because the Buddhism of sowing is just now being preached. These are the 2 sufferings confronting you now. In order to expiate the sin of your past slanders, you are opposed by your parents who hold mistaken views and must live in the age of a ruler who persecutes the devotee of the Lotus Sutra. The Sutra makes this absolutely clear. And that's why I told my family, I don't care if I go to hell then. And they're so freaked out about it. Never doubt, my Christian family, never doubt that you slandered. And this is that I've shown in saying this to all of us directly. Never doubt that you slandered the correct teaching in the past. It's virtually impossible that you didn't. All right? If you have doubt about this, you will be unable to withstand the minor sufferings in this life, because you're constantly wondering, why the fuck does this, pardon my language, why the hell does this happen to me? Okay, he just clarified why this happens to us. Do you understand? All right. Excuse my language for the kids out there. That doesn't happen often. The sutra makes this absolutely clear. Never doubt that you slandered the correct teaching in the past. If you have doubt about this, you will be unable to withstand the minor sufferings of this life. Then you may give in to your father's opposition and desert the Lotus Sutra against your will. Remember that if this happens, not only will you fall into hell, but also your precious parents will fall into the great Avicii hell, because they're the ones that took you there. They made that cause by being able to convince you. They didn't know what they were doing. By you capitulating, you create that cause for them. They will fall into the grate of each hell, causing all of you indescribable grief. The Daishonin is only trying to protect everyone from that. The essential thing is the great resolve to attain the way, to attain Buddhahood in your present form. Both of you have continued believing in the Lotus Sutra. Thus you are now ridding yourselves of your grave offenses from the past. For example, the flaws in iron come to the surface when it is forged. Put into flames, a rock simply turns to ashes, but gold becomes pure gold. This trial, more than anything else, will prove your faith genuine, and the 10 demon daughters of the Lotus Sutra will surely protect you. The demon who appeared to test the boy Snow Mountains was actually Chakra. The dove saved by King Shibi was the heavenly king Vashravana. It is even possible that the 10 demon daughters have possessed your parents and are tormenting you in order to test your faith. Any weakness in faith will be a cause for regret. The cart that overturns on the road ahead is a warning to the one behind. He's saying, use these examples as the basis for you to understand what you can't understand otherwise. In an age like this, no one can help but thirst for the way. You may hate this world, but you cannot escape it. People of Japan are certain to meet with terrible misfortune in the immediate future. The revolt that broke out on the 11th day of the 2nd month of the 9th year of Brunei was like blossoms being lashed by a gale, or like bolts of silk burning in an inferno. Who can help but abhor a world like ours? In the 10th month of the 11th year of Brunei, the people on Iki and Tsushima Islands were slaughtered at one stroke. How can we say that this is of no concern of ours? The soldiers who went off to confront the invaders, how forlorn they must be. They had to leave behind their aged parents, small children, young wives, and cherished homes to go out and defend a sea to no avail. If they see clouds on the horizon, they imagine them to be the enemy's banners. If they see fishing boats, they think them Mongol warships and are paralyzed with fear. Once or twice a day, they climb the hills to look out over the ocean, over the sea. 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night, they saddle and unsaddle their horses. They're still alive. They feel as though they were in the world of Asuras. This is all the guys that are in the military. These are all the samurai having to constantly be ready for the Mongols to invade, because the Mongols have already sent their emissaries saying, you either capitulate to us now or we're going to come and invade you. And they've already done it to 2 islands where they killed everybody. Everybody knows all that, right? Mm-hmm. When they try and get across the Sea of Japan, though, a storm comes up and destroys all their ships. That's what saved Japan. The Daishonin says, my prayer. Okay? All this and the hardships you have suffered as well can ultimately be blamed on the fact that this country's ruler has become an enemy of the Lotus Sutra. His opposition was instigated by the slanderers of the correct teaching, particularly the observers of the precepts and the Nimbutsu and true word priests. So that's, the Agamas, the Theravadas. You must persevere through this trial and see for yourselves the blessings of the Lotus Sutra. I, Nichiren, will also emphatically call on the heavenly gods, which he did, and the storm came up and blew them away. Now, more than ever, you must neither show nor feel any fear. You must persevere. I'm saying it again, because this isn't for us, it's not the Mongols about to invade. Okay, it's all the other shit that's going on right now. Okay, which is pretty much the same thing. You must persevere through this trial and see for yourself the blessings of the Lotus Sutra. You must manifest the proof of actual fact through your faith in your life. That's what that just said. I, Nichiren, will also emphatically call on the heavenly gods. I'll always be there to protect you, my disciples. I am the Gohonzon. Now more than ever, you must show neither show nor feel any fear. Because fear is what will kill that conviction and understanding of the inconquerable nature of your true self. Women are faint-hearted, and your wives have probably given up their belief. Yet you must grit your teeth and never slacken in your faith. Be as fearless as Nichiren when he acted and spoke out before Heino Seimonjo, before Tatsunokuchi. Although theirs was not the path to Buddhahood, the sons of Lord Wada and the Emperor of Wakasa as well as the warriors under Masakado and Sadato, fought to the death to preserve their honor. Death comes to all, even should nothing untoward ever happen. Therefore, you must never be cowardly. In other words, he's saying, don't ever be afraid of death. Death is going to happen one way or the other. There's no reason to ever be afraid of death. Mm-hmm. Death isn't into the unknown. If you have faith, you already know what's going to happen when you die. You know you're not going to disappear, and you're not going to go anywhere unpleasant based on your practice. Death comes to all, even should nothing untoward ever happen. Therefore, you must never be cowardly, or you will become the object of ridicule. I am deeply concerned. That's disgracing the Lotus Sutra. That become the object of ridicule. I am deeply concerned about you both. Therefore, I will relate a story that is important for you. Two princes named Po-yi and Shu-chi were the sons of the ruler Ku-chu in China. Their father had willed his title to the younger brother, Shu-chi. Yet after he passed away, Shu-chi refused to ascend the throne. Po-yi urged Shu-chi to assume the title, but Shu-chi insisted that Po-yi, the elder brother, should do so instead. Po-yi persisted, asking how the younger brother could contradict their father's will. Shu-chi agreed that their father's will clearly named him, yet he still refused the throne, claiming that he could not bear to push his elder brother aside. So they're both totally trying to be cool, right? All right. Listen to what happens. Both brothers then abandoned their parents' state and traveled to another, where they entered the service of King Wen of Chao. Shortly thereafter, the state was attacked. King Wen was killed by King Chao of the Yin dynasty. Less than 100 days after King Wen's death, his son King Wu was preparing to do battle with King Chao, but Po-yi and Shu-chi, holding fast to the reins of his horse, strove to dissuade him, saying, "You should be in mourning for 3 years after your father's death. If you start a war now, can this conduct be called filial?" King Wu grew furious at this and was about to kill them both, but Tai Kung Wang, the king's counselor, restrained him. The two were so loath to have anything more to do with this king that they went off to seclude themselves in Mount Shaoyang, where they lived solely on ferns. One day a person named Matsu passed by and asked, "Why have you hidden yourselves in a place like this?" They told Matsu the whole story, and he replied, "If that is so, don't these ferns also belong to the king?" Thus reproached, they immediately stopped eating the plants. It is not the way of heaven to forsake worthy men. Therefore a god appeared to them as a white deer and provided them with milk. After the deer had gone, Shu-chi said, "Since the white deer's milk is so sweet to drink, its meat must taste even better." Po-yi tried to silence him, but heaven had already heard his words, and the brothers were abandoned at once. Thus they eventually starved to death. After all that shit, they got nothing. All right? Even though one acts virtuously throughout one's life. Here's the point. Even though one acts virtuously throughout one's life, a single word, a single crucial moment, the mistake when you listen to an ikchantika and allow them to affect your faith, a single word can ruin one. Not knowing what thoughts you have in your hearts, I worry about you a great deal. When the thus come one Shakyamuni was a prince, his father, King Shuddhadana, could not bear losing his only heir, and so would not allow him to renounce his royal station. The king kept 2,000 soldiers posted at the palace's 4 gates to prevent him from leaving. Nevertheless, the prince eventually left the palace against his father's will. In all worldly affairs, it is the son's duty to obey his parents. Yet, on the path to Buddhahood, disobeying one's parents ultimately constitutes filial piety, because when you become the Buddha, they do too. That's the point you have to always remember. The contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra explains the essence of filial piety. By renouncing one's obligations and entering the Buddhist life, one can truly repay those obligations in full. That is, in order to enter the true way, one leaves one's home against one's parents' wishes and attains Buddhahood. Then one can truly repay one's debt of gratitude to them. In worldly affairs as well. So again, we were all born into families that don't uphold the correct teaching. All of us can save our parents and all of our siblings and everybody else 7 generations in the past by attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. And we will also affect 7 generations in the future. I don't know if you know this teaching, but that's the case. In worldly affairs as well, if one's parents foment a rebellion, it is one's filial duty not to follow them. This is mentioned in the classic of filial piety, which is by, I think, Tentai. When a great teacher Tentai engaged in meditation on the Lotus Sutra, he saw his deceased parents seated on his lap to obstruct his practice of Buddhism. This was the work of the heavenly devil, who took the form of his mother and father to oppose him. I have just cited the story of Poi and Shuchi. There is one more lesson you should learn from history. Emperor Ojin, who is now Great Bodhisattva Hachiman, was the 16th sovereign of Japan. Emperor Ojin had 2 sons. The first was Prince Nintoku, and the second Prince Uji. The emperor transferred his throne to the younger brother, Uji. Again, I guess this always happens or something, right? After their father passed away, Uji asked his elder brother to take the throne, but the elder brother reproached him, saying, "How can you refuse to comply with our father's will?" They argued back and forth, and for 3 full years, no one claimed the throne. So this is a Japanese example instead of a Chinese example. As a result, the people suffered indescribable grief. It was like a curse on the nation. You take it. No, you take it. You take it. No. And in the meantime, there's no king. There's no sovereign helping govern the rest of the people. It was like a curse on the nation, and Prince Uji finally thought, as long as I'm alive, my brother will not assume the throne. So he committed suicide. At this, Prince Nintoku was racked with sorrow and fell into despair. Seeing this, Prince Uji came back to life in order to give words of encouragement to his brother. Then he passed away again. It is recorded that when Nintoku at last ascended the throne, the nation became peaceful and received 80 boatloads of tribute yearly from the 3 Korean kingdoms of Silla, Pakche, and Korguyo. Other cases exist where the relationship between the sons of worthy rulers was not harmonious. When bonds have enabled you 2 brothers to continue, what bonds have enabled you 2 brothers to continue on such good terms? Could you be Prince's pure storehouse and pure eye reborn, or the embodiments of the Bodhisattva's medicine king and medicine superior? When your father disowned Tayu no Seiken, which is, I assume the older, is Muenaka's real name, I expected that Hyoei no Saken, which is Muenaga, would refuse to side with his brother, thereby making it even more difficult to clear up your father's doubt and have him rescind his disownment. If what the boy Tsuruo told me is true, you 2 were alike in your resolve. So overjoyed was I at this unbelievable news that I wrote another letter, one that precedes this one. Could there ever be a more wonderful story than your own? The record of the Western region tells about a hermit who lived in Deer Park at Varanasi, India, and in the hopes he could master occult powers, he could learn magic. He learned to turn tiles and pebbles into jewels and change the form of humans and animals, but he could not yet ride on winds and clouds or travel to the palace of the immortals. In order to accomplish these goals, he took as his assistant a man of integrity, giving him a long sword, and I'm going to go just a little long, but we're almost done. Giving him a long sword, the hermit instructed him to stand in one corner of a practice platform and told him to hold his breath and utter not a word. If the man remained silent through the whole night until dawn, the hermit was certain to master the occult. Determined, the hermit sat in the center of the platform with another long sword in hand and chanted incantations. Making his assistant take a vow, he said, "Even at the cost of your life, say nothing," he said to the assistant, right? The man answered, "Though I die, not a word will leave these lips." All right? In this manner, they passed the night until Just as dawn was about to break, the man cried out suddenly, and the hermit immediately failed in his attempt. He reproached the man, the assistant, saying, "How could you have broken your vow? This is deplorable." Repenting deeply, the man said, "I dozed off for a little while, and in a dream my previous master appeared and rebuked me. Yet I endured this, not uttering a word, for my debt of gratitude to you is much greater. My former master grew furious and threatened to behead me, but I still said nothing. Finally I was beheaded, and when I saw my own corpse proceeding on its journey from death to the next life, my sorrow was indescribable. Still, I did not speak. Eventually, I was reborn in a Brahmin family in southern India. The pain I felt on entering and leaving the womb was unbearable, yet I held my breath without crying. I grew up to be a young man and took a wife. My parents died. My child was born. I felt sorrow and joy, but said not a word. Living on like this, I reached my 65th year. Then my wife said to me, 'If you still refuse to say nothing, I will kill your beloved child.'" She's kind of pissed off, I can imagine. The thought flashed through my mind that I was already in the last years of my life, and that if my child were killed, I could not beget another. Feeling that I must shout, I suddenly awoke. And that's when I yelled. The hermit said, "We were not strong enough. You and I have been deceived by a devil. Our task has ended in failure." Lamenting, the man of integrity said, "Because I was so weak-willed, you have failed to master the occult." The hermit regretfully replied, "It is my fault for not having admonished you enough beforehand." Nonetheless, as the record states, the man was so grieved he could not fulfill his obligation to the hermit that he brooded over it and died miserably. In China, the occult evolved from Confucianism. Magic is bullshit. And in India, it is found among the non-Buddhist teachings. Magic is bullshit. Yet it does not even approach the Hinayana teachings. So I guess magic is bullshit. Okay, of the Agama Sutras, much less the connecting teaching, the specific teaching, or the perfect teaching. Therefore, how could it measure up to the Lotus Sutra? Magic is bullshit. The four devils fiercely oppose the mastery of even such a shallow art as the occult. The four devils fiercely oppose the mastery of even such a shallow art as the occult. How much greater then are the tribulations that will confront the disciples and lay persons of a person who is the first to embrace and the first to propagate in Japan the 7 characters of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So if you're a disciple of Nichiren, understand that. The ultimate principle of the Lotus Sutra. It is impossible to imagine, let alone describe in words. So he said all of this preceding that in order to make that point perfectly clear. The great teacher Tentai's great concentration and insight is the essence of his lifetime teachings and the heart of the whole spectrum of the Buddha's sacred teachings. During the more than 500 years after Buddhism was introduced to China, 10 teachers appeared, 7 in the north, 3 in the south. Their wisdom was as brilliant as the sun and moon, and their virtue was extolled throughout the country. Yet they were confused as to which sutras were shallow or deep, inferior or superior, and as to the order in which they had been taught. It was the great teacher Tentai Chi who not only clarified the Buddha's teachings and whipped ass on those 10 schools, okay, but also brought forth the wish-granting jewel of a single moment of life comprising 3,000 realms from the repository of the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo and bestowed it on all people in the three countries. This teaching originated in China, but that's theoretical Ichinen Sanzen in the Makashikan. Do understand that. This teaching originated in China. Not even the scholars of India could put forward such a concept. So the great teacher Chang'an commented, who actually wrote all of Tentai's teachings, there has never been anything to compare to the brightness and serenity of concentration and insight. And even the great scholars of India were not in a class with him, with Tentai. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life revealed in the 5th volume of Great Concentration and Insight. Everybody understands what we're talking about now, right? Because Great Concentration and Insight is the last teaching, and it's not until the end of Great Concentration and Insight the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is revealed by the writings of Chang'an, quoting Tiantai. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life revealed in the 5th volume of Great Concentration and Insight is especially profound. Why? Why is it especially profound? Because it's the basis for attaining Buddhahood in your present form.
Yeah.
Right? If you propagate it, then devils will arise without fail. Without fail. What is the equivalent of Great Concentration and Insight from the middle day of the law and latter day? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. If you propagate it, devils will appear. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's what he's telling them. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Devils will appear without fail. Okay? If they did not, there would be no way of knowing if this is the correct teaching. Because the Lotus Sutra says devils are going to appear when the correct teaching appears in the 5th 500 millennium. All right? Yeah, 5th 500 period. Okay, one passage from the same volume reads, as practice progresses and understanding grows, the 3 obstacles and 4 devils, right, emerge in confusing form, vying with one another to interfere. Sancho Shima will appear without fail. One should be neither influenced nor frightened by them. If one falls under their influence, one will be led into paths of evil. If one is frightened by them, one will be prevented from practicing the correct teaching. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This statement not only applies to me, but also is a guide for my followers. Reverently make this teaching your own and transmit it as an axiom of faith for future generations. That's what I'm doing right now. The 3 obstacles in this passage are the obstacles of earthly desires, the obstacle of karma, and the obstacle of retribution. The obstacle of earthly desires is the impediments to one's practice that arise from greed, anger, foolishness, and the like. The obstacle of karma is the hindrances presented by one's wife or children, and the obstacle of retribution is the hindrance caused by one's sovereign or parents. Of the 4 devils, the workings of the devil king of the 6th heaven are of this last kind. In Japan today, many people claim that they have mastered the practice of concentration and insight. Is there anyone who has actually encountered the 3 obstacles and 4 devils? The statement, if one falls under their influence, one will be led into the paths of evil, indicates not only the 3 evil paths, but also the worlds of human and heavenly beings, and in general, all the 9 worlds. Therefore, with the exception of the Lotus Sutra, pardon me while I burp. Therefore, with the exception of the Lotus Sutra, all of the sutras, those are the flower, garland, agama, correct, and equal, and wisdom periods, and the Nirvana and Mahavajrana sutras, will lead people toward the paths of evil. So if you know somebody is practicing Zen, don't say it's cool because they're so chilled. That's not getting them anywhere. You shakabuku them. This is why we do shakabuku. I'll reread that again. In Japan today, many people claim they have mastered the practice of concentration and insight, this serenity and calmness from this inner wisdom. But is there anyone who has actually encountered the 3 obstacles and 4 devils? The statement, if one falls under their influence, one will be led into the paths of evil, indicates not only the 3 evil paths, but also the worlds of human and heavenly beings, and in general, all of the 9 worlds, all of the realm that we exist in as living beings. Therefore, with the exception of the Lotus Sutra, only the Lotus Sutra, all the other sutras, those are the flower, garland, agama, correct and equal, and wisdom periods, and the Nirvana and Mahavajrana sutras, will lead people toward the paths of evil. Also, with the exception of the Tendai school, the adherents of the 7 other schools are in reality wardens of hell who drive others toward the evil paths. Even in the Tendai school are found those who profess faith in the Lotus Sutra, yet actually lead others toward the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings because they took on the true word bullshit. They too are wardens of hell who cause people to fall into the evil paths. So stay away from Mount Hei. Now you two brothers are like the hermit and the man of integrity. If either of you gives up halfway, you will both fail to achieve Buddhahood. You are like the two wings of a bird or the two eyes of a person, and your wives are your support. This is the marriage. This is the marriage address from Nichiren Shoshu from this point on here. You are like the two birds, two wings of a bird, or the two eyes of a person. If you ever got married in the temple, you'd know that. And your wives are your support. Women support others and thereby cause others to support them. When a husband is happy, his wife will be fulfilled. If a husband is a thief, his wife will become one too. This is not a matter of this life alone. A husband and wife are as close as form and shadow, flowers and fruit. Nirvana. Okay? A husband and wife are as close as form and shadow, as flowers and fruit, or roots and leaves in every existence of life. Insects eat the trees they live in, and fish drink the water in which they swim. If grasses wither, orchids grieve. If pine trees flourish, cypresses rejoice. Even trees and plants are so closely related. This was talking about what a husband, a man, people that get married. The hioku is a bird with one body and two heads. Both of its mouths nourish the same body. Himoku are fish with only one eye each, so the male and female remain together for life. A husband and wife should be like them. You two wives should have no regrets, even if your husbands do you harm because of your faith in this teaching. If both of you unite in encouraging your husband's faith, you will follow the path of the Dragon King's daughter and become a model for women attaining Buddhahood in the evil latter age. Insofar as you can act this way, no matter what may happen, Nichiren will tell the two sages, the two heavenly kings, the 10 demon daughters, Shakyamuni, many treasures, to make you Buddhas in every future existence. A passage in the 6th Paramita Sutra says to become the master of your mind, rather than let your mind master you. Whatever trouble occurs, regard it as no more than a dream and think only of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren's teaching was especially difficult to believe at first, but now that my prophecies have been fulfilled, those who slandered without reason have come to repent. Even if in the future other men and women become my believers, they will not replace you in my heart. Among those who believed at first, many later discarded their faith, fearing that society would reject them. Among those are some who oppose me more furiously than those who slandered from the beginning. In Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, the monk Sunakshatra believed that the Buddha at first, then later not only backslid, but also slandered so viciously that even the Buddha could not save him from falling into the hell of incessant suffering. This letter was written particularly for Hyoe no Sakin, for Muenaga, I believe. It should also be read to his wife and to Tayu no Sakin's wife. So Muenaga's wife and Muenaka's wife and Muenaga. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nichiren, the 16th day of the 4th month of the 12th year of Brunei. Thank you very much for another long evening. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't that